Welcome to the podcast. I'm Kevin Miller. In this episode, can anything overcome our expectations for ourselves? And I'm with spiritual teacher Cathy Heller. So I grew up in the Christian church amongst celebrated Bible verses such as ask and ye shall receive, knock and the door will be open to you, seek and ye shall find. These concepts and requests were, of course, aimed at God. Well, today we hear a lot about manifesting, and it often gets friction from the religious crowd as it feels like credit is not given to God specifically. Well, in this episode today, I have a conversation with Cathy Heller about this. Now, we're not necessarily discussing and dissecting, debating religion and doctrine, but really honing in on expectations, which is a concept I have just been researching deeply as of late. I mean, can someone have faith in God, but suffer from not expecting good things for themselves, really? Will they come their way in that case? Can someone not have faith in God, but benefit because they expect good things to come their way? And thus my title for the episode, asking, can anything overcome our expectations for ourselves? Well, Cathy Heller, she's a renowned teacher, podcaster, author. She hosts a top spiritual podcast called Abundant Ever After. And she's a practitioner of what she cites as the law of reception, has a large following that includes a lot of the top psychologists that I respect and have had here on the podcast. So she has a new book called Abundant Ever After, Tools for Creating a Life of Prosperity and Ease. And as I read it, I just resonated with Cathy's spirit, and I was intrigued with a lot of her perspectives around this concept. So following is our discussion together. If you do decide to buy her book, if you'll go to Cathy, C-A-T-H-Y, cathyheller.com/book, she has some of her courses that she will give you for free. When I'm not having these conversations about human potential, I'm working with clients directly on theirs and often putting those into their business and work. You can connect with me about that at kevinmiller.co or email me, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Here are a few sponsors. They help make the show possible. Then drive with me as I talk with Cathy Heller about this concept of our expectations and the power of them. Cathy, I don't have you on the show because you have a new book. I have you on the show because the book is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And I am in, I would say, great alignment and resonance with you. And I'm going to take the opportunity to pick and pull at some of the issues and topics. So if you're game for that, this will be fun.
Well, that's awesome and so cool to hear that. And such an answered prayer. Honestly, I've been doing this podcast for 8 years, mostly women listening. And I said to my team, I'm like, I really want to reach men and women equally, and I really want to start to talk to men who have such incredible hearts and such insight and to really bridge the worlds, and so it means so much to me because for 8 years doing my podcast, I really wasn't asked to be on podcasts that men hosted. I don't know why that is, but it's so important for me. Our audience, is filled with women who need to hear from men like you. So I can't wait to have you on my show.
Well, it'll be an honor. I had a friend the other day. We just met, hadn't seen each other for a while. And he said, so, tell me what's happening with the show. How much of it is, you're talking just kind of on the personal development side and the spiritual side. And I said, man, Patrick, I can't figure out anything that I'm doing now that's not spiritual. I can't separate it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the best answer, by the way, because that's how you're so in alignment with your soul's calling.
Well, I'm finding more. I feel like I am, you go through cycles and it's another awakening.
Isn't
cycle.
It amazing how it just keeps expanding? Like as you go through your life, like, oh my God, there's even more here for me to perceive. There's even more love for me to experience. There's even more joy. There's even more to this incredible kaleidoscope.
I agreed. Yeah. I feel voracious with it right now. I just can't.
Good.
Matter of fact, I just got, here's my latest book. Maybe you'll appreciate this. Let's see if you can see it. It's,
Oh, it's beautiful.
yeah. That's one. It's just, another one that I haven't really dug into, and
I'm
it
going to go get
feels,
that one now too, because so many people have recommended that I study that. And I'm like, okay, it's time.
oh, and I'm saying this like people, for those listening to the podcast, it's the Tao Te Ching. And, okay, we'll get there. We'll get there. I want to take some 10,000 foot passes, on your book, on the topic, on the message. And this is right out. And I try not to do this a lot, but there's just, I found myself typing a lot of lines, a lot of, quotes out of the book that I wanted to dig into. This is right out of the intro. So not even page 1. You wrote, "We are so committed to the illusion and to the idea that the way life works is for it all to be hard. In truth, it is meant to flow and feel like ease." I resonate, and I also feel how that hits people, and I don't know if they know where to go with them. And we are so, as you know, the influx is that life is hard. And even if we don't think life is hard, which I don't think I have before, really. I haven't really come from that. I've great privilege to not come from that. But I've still struggled under I make life hard sometimes. I still have my autonomy, even in my own religious past, which we may touch on. I still was a big believer in free will and go, man, I've screwed some stuff up. I think I've got some free will here. I can screw it up. I can make it hard.
100%.
And so if it's not life is hard, I've made it hard. And so as much as I'm going to say I resonate with you, I just feel like that's one of those statements that I don't know if people know what to do with. Yeah, so 100%. Grapple with that with me.
I'm glad you pulled that out. And I often say, when I say something like that, I often say, this is going to sound really controversial.
Yeah.
That life is not meant to be a struggle. It's not meant to be hard. It's meant to be ease. It's meant to come into your life all day as synchronicity. And the most extraordinary things that have ever happened to any of us came through synchronicity, like how you met your spouse, how you wound up doing the thing you're doing, the soul that becomes the child that you're going to have. Like you didn't choose, you know what I mean? Like it's the most extraordinary things do come through the ease. But when you really zoom out, let's really get clear, right? At the end of the day, when you start to really reflect on what is it that we're after, right? When we want to feel fulfilled, very often the reason it feels hard is because the mind is always in lack and the heart is always in abundance. The mind is your amygdala, which was built to protect us. And so what it does all day long is it scans for danger and tells you the threat, and actually makes it so much harder to see clearly what's actually real, because it's an illusion of fear all the time. And it also disconnects you from who you really are, right? When I met Deepak Chopra, he said to me, "Say, I am Cathy Heller." So I said it. He said, "Say it again." I said it again. He said, "Now say, I am Cathy." So I said it. He said, "Does that feel lighter than Cathy Heller?" I said, "Yeah, a little bit." He goes, "Now just say, I am." And there you are, right? The soul of all of us, because God is infinite, there is nowhere God isn't. And so our soul is connected to God at all times. And our soul is not a body. We're nobody, because we're a someone. As my rabbi said, we're someone, we're some of the one. So when the mind perceives that its wholeness is outside of itself, and in order for it to feel whole, it has to have more money, more stuff, more things, more accolades, more validation will finally make it feel more of itself inside of it. It feels hard. But when what you're really after, people didn't come to the world for a pile of things. What they're after is inner peace and joy, and to perceive further, and to understand how one we are with the universe. When we sleep at night, our body is tracking the circadian rhythm of the sun, moon, and stars. That's how one we are with all that is. So anybody who's sitting on a park bench and feeling at ease and feeling joy, it's not because of how many people validated them. It's not how many buildings they own. It's how much peace they have in their heart, which makes them sit on the same bench as someone next to them on the same bench who's feeling that life is hard because they're not perceiving all the abundance and overflow that they have just sitting on the same park bench as this other person, because they're caught in their head thinking that in order to finally feel arrived, in order to finally feel ease, they would have to have something outside of themselves happen, somebody else's love, somebody else's validation, more money, it's like, that's what makes it feel hard. And it's a wild goose chase that the mind is sending you on that's not even real, because all of your wholeness is always available to you no matter what, at all times, inside of the beingness of who you really are, apart from the story that your mind is telling. You check in and close your eyes and you can feel there's an equanimity there. There's a well-being there. There's a wisdom there, and it comes from within, which is why we call insight.
Okay. Couple questions, or just not questions, just digging in on that one. Though it's interesting as you talk about that sitting on the park bench. And I've been on the process, I'll call it the letting go process, or I guess Michael Singer would say the surrender process, for a while.
I love him.
I think started with Anthony DeMello and letting go of attachments, and David Hawkins with letting go, and Tolle. And as I work to let go of those external things, I can now sit on the park bench, and all the external stuff is so much more beautiful. It's so, what would that be? Counterintuitive, I guess. And so as you mentioned the park bench, that stuck out to me. You mentioned a couple times there, who we are. I am. You started with that. I am and who we are. That is one. Tell me your thoughts on that being, I have been looking at it as not fixed. I am, and I want to say X. I am this, or I am that, or whatever. And I've been moved more to be saying, I am currently this. I am becoming this. I am, in a verb sense, maybe verbing it. I am this as a verb, not a fixed noun. So less a fixed and more of a fluid. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is fluid. So in the book, I talk about this. There's a way in which we talk about monotheism, right? We talk about Abraham. Abraham was the father of monotheism, and people don't know what that means. They say, oh, it's because everybody around him up until that point in history believed that these idols, these multiple things, there was the God of the sun, the God of the thing, the da, 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 da. And he's like, no, there's just one God. But it's so much deeper than that, because the central prayer in Judaism is Shema Yisrael, which means that God is one. Not that there's just one God, there is, but that God is oneness. So who are we? Well, there's nowhere God isn't. God is infinite. If God was over there and you're over here, you just limited God. So who are we? There's just this one thing going on, this oneness, right? And so we perceive the world through the lens of 3D because the eyeball sees 3D. But Einstein said the world is made of 10 dimensions. We just don't perceive those with the naked eye. So who are we? Well, if you were to look at who we are, we're made of atoms. Well, atoms are 99%. An atom is 99% of vibration, of frequency, and less than 1% of particles. So if you were to actually see yourself through the lens of real reality, you are like a sphere of frequency. But I don't have the glasses to see you that way. So I see you as a separate physical thing. But the truth is that there's this one infinite field of intelligence, and we're each little spheres of energy, and that's all connected. It's like looking at the ocean and saying, no, see that wave's not connected to this wave. Well, what do you mean? Waves are all connected to each other, and they're all the ocean itself. That's how everything is. So I think of it like, if God was the sun, we'd be a ray of that light. If our body is the light bulb, our soul is the light. But where is the light coming from? Well, when you plug a lamp in, it comes from the electricity. So when people get into flow state, whether they're painting the Sistine Chapel like Michelangelo, or writing music, or they're on the basketball court like Michael Jordan, flow state they'll all say the same thing. Something bigger than me is moving through me. You are the lamp and God is the light. And our job is to allow ourselves to be a vessel, a vehicle for a light greater than ourselves, right? So that's the I amness. The brain tells us a story about the I am that's really limited. Like, you're good at math, you're bad at this, you're this many feet tall, but that's not who we are, right? Because when somebody walks in a room, who they are is not where they went to college. It's not what car they're driving. It's their energy. Are they loving? Are they compassionate? We all know that there are people in our lives who deplete us of energy. We're around them for 10 minutes. We're like, I need to take a nap, right? And then there's other people we have in our life. We're around them for 10 minutes. We feel so energized. We get new ideas. We feel so alive. We're ready to run a marathon, right? Because A, we're all connected and transmitting vibration and energy all the time because we're all one. But B, the greatest thing that we do is when we move into our soul, we move out of trying to be impressive. We move out of this little character we're playing. We move into our soul consciousness. We are emanating the oneness of the world is like moving through us, love, joy, compassion, creativity, and it's all flowing from this quantum field, which then everyone around us, it's almost as if we become like Wi-Fi and everybody else plugs into the Wi-Fi and says, oh my God, you just brought me back to the power that's inside of me, right? And then that's where things really get interesting. It's like when you go to a concert and everybody walks in as a separate stranger, and then there's a moment where everybody puts up their lighter and you look around the concert and the whole stadium has their lighters up, and it's like this bliss. You just feel like you're one with everybody there. That feeling is more accurate because we are all one and we're all wanting to just be connected to that infinite oneness. And that's becoming really ourselves, is being a vessel to be part of that oneness that's much greater than this little tiny personality that the mind created.
I want to talk on the energy that you just talked about. You mentioned something. It's been a wonder to me for a long time, since it was first introduced to me, the concept. It was actually a therapist showed me a study of, here's a guy and they took some of his cells and put it in a petri dish and put them in different rooms. And what they did to him, his cells over here reacted to, and then they, moved him a block away and then a mile away. And I'm blown away because I'm sitting there thinking, holy crap, what I'm feeling is affecting everybody around me. And it was really daunting at the time. But to look at that, and you mentioned this, you wrote to this in the book, I'll paraphrase a little bit. And you said, we go and we fix our hair, put our clothes on during the day to appeal to whoever, and wash our car and walk in with our accoutrements or whatever, and don't think about our energy. And yet that's what we tune into more than anything. I had Lynn Twist on the show and she talked about, your mood. He says, we sense these people's moods, when they first walk in the door, and we don't think about that. And to think about, here I am screwing with my exterior stuff, and the thing that's going to impact my kids, my family, my clients, the show here is my energy. How did we not, I grew up in the church. I grew up in a personal development home. I mean, I had a lot of exposure. Man, I did not get that at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
First of all, I think that's true for so many people. No matter the religious practice, I think a lot of kids grow up and what they were exposed to was not the full totality of what that practice has to offer. I just had Marianne Williamson on. She was talking about the mystical side of Jesus, and I mean, everything about Jesus is so amazing and gorgeous and mystical, but you could miss it. People have ways of superimposing things onto truth that sort of sometimes don't express all that there is, only parts of it. So I relate to that because I grew up Jewish, but I didn't feel like it was that interesting. And then I went to Jerusalem and I met these amazing people who were just so wide open and so connected. I was like, oh, okay, that's what it really is. But energy is everything. And it is the most impressive thing. The most impressive person in a room, it's not what car they drive. It's how loving their energy is. And the most powerful people are the most loving. And power doesn't come through, where you went to college or how much you can rattle off information. It's how much does your energy hold for everybody in the room to feel at ease. And powerful people don't try to protect their energy because they project their energy.
Yeah.
You know, if the Dalai Lama went to the DMV right now, he would still have a great time because he's a walking portal of love and joy. And so he would feel like that was exactly where he needed to be to bring the energy. And what we often do is we externalize our power. We don't know what's inside of ourselves. And so we allow everything in the external world to affect our energy, when actually, when we are coherent and we are coming from love, and you wake up in the morning and you listen to God and you pray and you look outside your window and you notice the 47 shades of green and you feel so tapped into the abundance of your life force, you become a walking generator of energy. And then wherever you go, it's amazing, actually. It's like the pilot light is always on inside everyone else, and it will come to life because you were there. You will actually turn on and tap into the energy that's inside of everyone, because you're so in overflow. You're coming from such love. You will evoke that love. And by the way, that's what's in the book, where when we talk about this metaphor in the book that my rabbi said to me, the world works like a radio. It's like when you turn on a radio, where was the music before you turned it on? Well, it was hidden in plain sight. It's already here. You just can't perceive it because you didn't have the radio turned on. It's like if you walk through your world with the energetic frequency of love, the music starts playing everywhere you go because people feel that you're tuned into it.
Yeah.
When you walk through the world the opposite way with lack, and you walk through the world with fear, doubt, shame, all of that, you just perceive that radio station in everyone, and that's what comes out of every experience because that's what you're tuned to.
So let's hit on that. As everybody's going along, you're doing your average day and X happens. Good, bad, whatever happen. Well, let's say bad, because that's where we tend to focus so much. So something that you would not have desired to have happen happens. And I read that section, and here you are saying, okay, there's different frequencies to tune into. You can tune in to these different frequencies. And I've felt for a long time the struggle, I think, in the demographic that we have, call it personal development, self-improvement, whatever, it's driving people, but to look at that and it feels disingenuous to go, oh yeah, you're just saying think positive, right? Just kind of Pollyanna, wipe that on. But I'm feeling really bad. I mean, the emotions inside me, I can't just turn off or reject. And I don't want to, and I don't think we would say to do that, but we still have that frequency to what I've been playing with mostly is how do I interpret it? I can't change what happened. X just happened.
Right.
But I can address why I think it happened, what it means about me or for me. And then, of course, how I respond. Does that line up with how you look at the frequency?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think there's a whole lot of misconception when it comes to what people really mean when they're really coming from alignment and they're telling you to be in this high vibration. I think it's a misnomer to say that means you can't feel whatever there is to feel. It's bigger than that. And here's what I mean. When I started studying mindfulness and I started, studying with Jon Kabat-Zinn and learning from him, I realized that there is a greater feeling than happiness, which is equanimity. Because equanimity is the ability to sit beside the river and be with everything as it is. And pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And the part that you just said is exactly right on, because when we make meaning of things, we can either feel the pain, which is beautiful because it turns to wisdom, or we can make meaning and react to things and create stories that create suffering around the experience. Yeah. When I was in hospice with my dad, who passed in July, that hospice room was so heartbreaking and so heart-opening that I did not want to be anywhere else. So I was completely not only was I aware of my pain, but I couldn't believe how it physically hurt my heart to feel that much sadness. Yeah. I thought if you took an x-ray, you could see it. That's how much pain I was in. And then it dawned on me in the 6 days I was sitting there that grief is your heart drowning in love. That's what love feels like. Because how much you love is how much your heart breaks open. It's like, right? Because if you hear about a person who passes who you never met, you go, oh, I'm so sorry, right? But if this is someone you loved, your heart. And so it's so fascinating because being able to be with that pain felt like such a gift from God. I felt so blessed to have loved that deeply. So what's the meaning being made? Yeah. And no, what I wasn't doing, I wasn't telling myself, don't feel sad, don't cry. No, I was crying. I was there. I was holding his hand. But I felt the deep, deep, deep gift in that. Even when I was in labor with my 3 daughters, thank God I have these 3 girls, I was in so much pain, right? Like physically, that is such a hard experience. And I felt so aware of the blessing of that pain. Yeah. It was it felt so purposeful. It was every second of that pain. It wasn't suffering. It was purpose. I was getting to bring my kids into the world. So, and I look back even at really awful things, like my parents got divorced and my mom tried to commit suicide and I didn't see her for a while. And it was just so dark. And I think about how hard that was, and all of that and my courage to really not run away from it, but to feel it, is exactly why I do what I do today. It's why I wrote these books. It's why I went to Israel. It's why I stayed there for 3 years. All these gifts that have come into my life is because of the contrast of all these hard things, because it propelled me into seeking so much, right? And so it's not that you don't feel the feelings. It's the story you make up about what you're feeling. And if you think about, I mentioned the Dalai Lama before and how the Dalai Lama could have fun at the DMV. But this man, I would imagine, has such a practice of compassion that he can feel the pain that's around the world all the time. And yet, there's an equanimity of feeling both all the pain and all the joy. In fact, if you don't feel the pain, you can't feel the extent of the joy, right? It's only because we know how sad it will be when we leave this earth that we experience the joy to the extent that we do. But if we were to be numb to the sadness, right, then the joy is whatever. It's no. You're going to cry your eyes out at your daughter's wedding because you were there the whole time and you know what you're losing, but you also know what you're gaining, right? And that's what makes you so happy and sad in the same moment. It's this is such a sadness, but this is such a joy, and all of that goes together. So we're not saying don't feel your feelings. We're saying roll out the bigger wisdom of your heart consciousness. And the heart can tolerate all of it. The heart can feel the pain. The heart can feel the joy. It's the mind that can't feel any of it. So it just makes up all this story, all this meaning, and then you suffer because you actually tell yourself, don't feel any of it. Don't feel too much joy. It'll be taken away. Don't feel all the sadness because you'll drown in it. No, your heart can tolerate all of it.
Thank you. And I am smiling some and I am nodding, but it's a newfound and still feels infant understanding, because I've been on the other side. You talk about what we do here on your, what you do on your show, what I do here. One of the reasons you're here and we're talking about this topic is because it has become a salvation for me from not having done it. All you just talked about, I did not do the negative feelings. I did not, I wasn't even hardly aware of them. It's almost hard to resonate with that I stuffed them because I wasn't even aware. I didn't know until later when the problem of that manifested, when I hit the wall. And then it was either die with it or have a new realization. I'm here with the new realization, but I still feel new in it. So all you're talking about is fresh, some of it's as fresh as last week, some 3 years ago, but whatever it is,
I get that.
It is. So I've been there, and in doing that, I want to hit on a piece on the meaning.
You're so cute. And by the way, I relate to everything you just said. The only reason that any of us can teach anything is because we are our first student. Yeah. And so like growing up in my house, I was like the quote unquote happy kid who was going to fix everything. And so the way that I kind of white knuckled myself through my parents' divorce and my mom's depression and her medical issues with her depression, like I was like, everything's great. Oh my God. And I'm going to be the cheerleader and until finally that just wasn't going to work anymore. And I had to, break open. And I actually went to this place called Onsite, which you probably know what that is.
I had Miles.
Oh, he's amazing.
I had him on the show. It's been a long time. And I got tuned into him from Donald Miller, who went there.
He's amazing.
Yeah. And so
they're all amazing. Donald Miller, Bob Goff, Miles Adcox, they're all part of this Onsite world. Yeah. And I went to Onsite 5 years ago. Okay. And I was like, at the time, I was a successful podcaster. I wrote this book about like doing your life's calling, living into your purpose, all of that. But I was like, rah, let's go. And there I am 5 years ago thinking that my life is about being a motivator, being an activator. And I'm really good at it. And I can speak life into people and people start taking action and it's amazing. And they're all becoming successful. And then I like hit this brick wall and I go to Onsite through the suggestion of a friend. And I get there and we play out at Onsite. It's just unbelievably beautiful what they do. And it started by these really deep-hearted healers who are also Christians. And they just have so much love to give the world. They're just an amazing group of humans. But you act out your family of origin, like your life. And somebody plays you as a little kid and somebody plays your parents, somebody plays God. It's actually the most stunning thing in the world. And I saw myself at 8 years old standing in the living room with my parents and holding as much as I was holding. And eventually the therapist said to me, why don't you walk over to 8-year-old you and tell her you don't have to live here anymore. And tell her I'm coming to get you. And everyone was sobbing. And I realized that in order to tread water, I just cut off feeling the enormity of what was so much at the time. And then it was like floodgates. And then I realized that there was so much beauty. And I met with Byron Katie and she said to me, what if you chose all of it? What if your soul knew exactly what it was doing? Because look who you can become. On behalf of other people, you can help them cross this ocean now because of that exact path. And I was like, oh my God, she's so enlightened. And so I moved into the spiritual world. I went from having a top business podcast. It was called Don't Keep Your Day Job. It was all about doing your passion. And we changed into spirituality and really looking at the mission of our work here as a soul. And I had already been practicing so much of this behind the scenes and mindfulness and my Judaism and having a relationship with God and all of that, but I hadn't been putting it front and center. And I realized how thirsty people were to really explore the totality of who they were. And so, I think that it's so beautiful when we explore the fullness of ourselves, because sometimes people get stuck in the don't feel your sadness, just like be rah. But sometimes it's the other extreme where people just get so caught in the world of, let's say, therapy, where they're just continuously revisiting this old story and the old meaning they made out of the story, when really the soul is beyond all of it, right? And that's where all of the wisdom, all the pain turns to wisdom, and all of it gets to become the gift, and
well, let me ask on that in regards to what you said that Byron Katie shared, that what if,
oh my God,
what if you, in essence, you did this, you I was going to say manifested, however you want to do that. But you mentioned it in your book in regards to, I'll own it. I'm putting this frequency out. And in essence, from a scriptural standpoint, reaping what I sow. Well, on one side, I have probably used that in an effort to have too much control. That, it's all like the nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
I'm just all nurture. I didn't want to believe in nature until I had a whole bunch of kids who came out so different I couldn't ignore it anymore. But I wanted to use it for control. On the other side, though, I sense a lot of people really struggling with taking that much responsibility for what has happened. And I have compassion for that as well. I don't know that that's any worse than me over here trying to use it to control things as well. And yet, I was going to say to come to the middle. I don't even know if that's fair. Maybe it's the third way is to look at it and go, but outside of that, I don't know what hope there is. Then I am just a victim, and I'm just kind of going with whatever happens, and it happened to me.
I think it's really an interesting question. I mean, look, there is no doubt that I love the way my rabbi says this. He says that because God is perfect, God can't take a risk because God knows everything. So there's no risk because it knows the answer, right? Yeah. But a person is flawed, and a person has a soul that's connected and pure and perfect, but a mind that's an ego that's all like confused, like a bumbling detective. And so it does take many risks because it doesn't have the perfection that God has. It doesn't see it. So it has this courage. So what is that all about? Meaning to say, God doesn't have free will because God is only perfect and only knows the answer. It knows the objective truth, right? It's not a choice. It just knows it. It's whatever it's creating intentionally because that's what God does. God is perfect. But human beings have free will. Mm-hmm. Now, when you really think about, well, what does that mean? Did I create it or did it happen to me? I like the way that Gay Hendricks talks about this because he says, if you get on an airplane these days, airplanes fly themselves. They just have enough instruments, they fly themselves. Yeah. He says, but what is the pilot's job? Because it's still really important. The pilot's job is takeoff and landing. And then during the flight, the pilot has to watch the drift from the flight path and bring it back to the path. That's its only job. And that to me is our free will being put to good use. And what I mean by what we create and what we don't, like this. God takes care of takeoff and landing. We don't know when we're going to be born. We don't know when we're going to die. Our job in between is to know where is your alignment? What is your choice? What is the choice to stay on the flight path? And the rest of it, if you just keep doing your job, which is to be in the place of your soul's alignment, which you always know, it might be inconvenient what the answer is, but you always know what the answer is. But if you keep choosing that alignment, the synchronicity will take you on the flight path. And that is bigger than us. That's the part that's out of our control. That's the part where it's like, I didn't know when I was going to meet my husband. I didn't know which souls were going to be born to me. There's so much beyond my control, but my choice was choosing my alignment, listening to my heart. Because at every moment, you're either choosing from fear or you're choosing from love. But here's the cool way that God works. Even if you move off the flight path, because he loves us so much and his infinite mercy, he's going to create things there that will give you another opportunity to choose again. And then that's the hero's journey, that even when you think you're going away from it, he's going to give you other choices to make that could bring you back, right? And so it's sort of like when people say, my God, I can't believe it took me this long till I finally got out of that abusive relationship. It was like, well, you didn't see this choice the first time. So you kept making the wrong choice. And then finally it got so bad that you could finally get another choice, another at bat and say, oh, now, but it took me that much till but like, because we're so loved by this infinite creator, we will continue to be given the choice. Like, oh, you drifted, but are you going to choose it? Oh, you chose it. Finally, you chose the right way. And so that happens every day, all day long.
That, Cathy, that's one of the, if I had to call it an Achilles heel, I guess, of me as I feel this continual dawning, that's awesome. There's also this part that I have to deal with. It's going, oh my gosh, man. Wouldn't it be great if that happened 30 years ago, buddy? The amount of pain you would have not caused and the amount, and I can't change it. I I have to breathe deep and let that one go.
And you know what? Whatever pain you caused was exactly what that person also needed, because if my dad had been perfect, I wouldn't have the life I have right now.
All right, hold on. I want to press in on that one because that's a bit of a soft spot. I shouldn't say a soft spot. I grapple with that one a lot. I had you may have had him too on the show, Dan Pink. I've had him on a couple times, and
no, now I want to.
Oh, well, he has a book. I don't remember if it's his latest book or not. It's a year or two, something like that, and it's called The Power of Regret. I really liked it because I came from kind of a no regrets family. Well-meaning, I appreciate that, but I at some point realized, probably after I'd done some stuff, I thought, man, I get redemption. I get that whatever I did, maybe it helped that person, even though it seemed painful. It helped me. It gave me wisdom. I'm sitting here today as a result of a lot of things that I did, that I learned the hard way, whatever, or I learned from doing there was some pain involved. How's that? And I appreciate what I'm going to call some redeeming aspects of that, but I don't look back and go, no regrets, because I wouldn't choose to cause that pain again. Reconcile that a little bit, because that's another one of those. As I was reading your book, I thought I'm with you, and oh man, I know that people struggle with that. So let's play with them.
First of all, one of the reasons I was so grateful to write this book is because, people know a little bit about Jesus, but they don't know enough. And we talk about him on his birthday, which is coming up. But this man was a rabbi, okay, and he was also, in so many ways, just spouting so much of this wisdom. And one of the things that I have in me is a little bit of that wisdom, this Torah wisdom, right? And what I can tell you that Judaism says about guilt and regret is really interesting, which is that regret is really healthy. It's responsibility. We should all have regret. In fact, if you don't think you could do it better, if you have another at bat at another day and another chance, you miss something. But guilt is not healthy. Okay, so fair. Regret is healthy. Regret means, you know what? That's constructive. The way that I handled that, that's regrettable. I'm going to do it better. I know there's more to me than that. Guilt is something that's toxic, because guilt is shame. And guilt is owning everybody's experience. And we all created the experience together. When my dad was married to my mom, they had this horrible relationship and they were terrible to each other. And then he married someone else, and then he married someone else. And his third wife, they were together for 25 years, when he would scream, which is what his go-to was in the beginning of the marriage, like it was with my mom, she would hold his hands and she would say, I love you like life. And we are not going to do that to each other. Look at me. That is not happening here. She loved him so much, and she was so willing to set a boundary with him that he became a better person. When he was with my mom got so small when he would get scary, so she couldn't stand in her truth and help him become who he could become, because she saw him only as this raging, scary person, and then would demonize him, which would make him more scary. So I'm just saying they both co-created that experience. And now in my dad's death and in my mom being single for so long, she sees that she missed her own opportunity to stand up and say, I see who you really are. Here's where my boundary is going to be. Here's what's going to work for us. Here's what's not going to work for us. When somebody's with somebody who's an alcoholic, which my dad also was at the time, you either enable that person or you say, I have some wholeness here. I'm going to bring some strength in here, which is things are going to change because they're going to have to change, right? That was her now regret, is that she didn't step up and say, oh yeah, we have children and here's what's going to go down. She was so afraid and so codependent that no one could get to alignment because no one was minding the steering wheel. So how could he have guilt for all of it? He did his piece, she did her piece, and the two of them needed the lesson that they both needed. And that is what it is. Now, the Torah also says that in Jewish wisdom, we understand that when someone veers so far from who they are, and they turn around and they go and they repent and they repair what that is, everything they ever did that was negative turns to positive. That's how powerful becoming who we're supposed to be is. In fact, when Jacob is sitting with his children and he goes to give the blessing of who's going to lead the people, he doesn't give it to Joseph, because Joseph, he said, was perfect. He was just this perfect person from the time he was born. But Judah wasn't. Like Judah had all these moments of really fall from grace. Like he slept with this prostitute, Tamar, and he threw his brother into a pit, and he had jealousy, and he had all this stuff, but he overcame all of that and became such an incredible righteous person that his father said to him, you are the best person to lead, because you can show people who they are and who they can be. So that would only have happened not from feeling guilty and then feeling that, he was a nobody, but feeling I have regret because I know I'm so much more than this, and I'm going to become who I'm really meant to be.
Let's take that and go into, you've said the word 5, 7, 9 times, alignment, which is a word I really like. I use it in my book a lot in coming into it, and I realize it's used a lot in a lot of different contexts. So I'm just going to go with the context that I'm understanding here. You mentioned trusting your alignment, coming back in, and yet I feel that a lot of folks don't trust their alignment because they don't know what it is. You actually say in your book, it's one of your little exercises that you have, and I don't want to waste time on the show to look for my notes on it, but you talk about looking at what your dream is in essence, being clear on that, come back to that dream. And as I, like you, walk with so many people, I realize that a lot of them, they never had a dream and don't have a dream. They may have some goals. They may have some destinations that they want to reach, but to have a really big conceptualized dream, or I think you also said alongside that, a vision, they don't have. So I'm taking that and kind of extrapolating that over here to when I have that, that's my alignment that I'm going to come back into, like the pilot, with the plane. But I think a lot of people hearing this are going to, I don't know what my alignment is. And I resonate with that, because even though I have thought that I did, I've realized in retrospect that sometimes I didn't. I thought I did, but I didn't.
Yeah, I think what's really freeing about that whole discussion that really helps a lot is to understand that the dreams you're meant to chase are the dreams that chase you. You're chosen. It'll come to you. Right? Like Moses walked into the wilderness for 85 years and God's like, no, you need to be back here. You need to be back here. What I'm saying is your alignment at every moment is to find the most well-being inside of yourself, the most equanimity, the most wholeness, the most peace, the most joy. And then you will be led to where you can solve the most problems, where you can serve the most, where you are meant to contribute the most. You will be led to it. That is how it works for all of us. When I came to Los Angeles, I write about this in the book, I had this little whisper of, I think I want to have a record deal and be writing music and touring the world like Joni Mitchell. And I worked at that, and I got a record deal, and I was signed to Interscope, and I was sitting there, and Lady Gaga was recording Paparazzi. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here, and what's going to be? And oh my goodness. And then I got dropped from that record deal, and I was like, that's insane. I was so close. Okay, I'm going to do it again. And I met Craig Kalman, who runs Atlantic Records, and I got signed to Atlantic. I was like, it was just, I needed a different record label. Oh, this is so much better. Oh, this is going to make so much sense. And then that record label didn't work out. And I wound up feeling very down. Like, wait a minute, God, wasn't I supposed to use my gift? You got me so close, but now what am I supposed to do? Just be a regular person? I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to use my voice. And sure enough, I wound up using my voice to start a podcast, which was the most random thing in the world. I had just had my daughter. Her name's Maddie. She was 3 weeks old. And I'm talking to a friend at a bagel shop who I run into. And she's like, oh my God, your daughter's so cute. What's her name? I said, Maddie. She goes, oh, my husband works with this woman named Maddie. Is she Madison or Madeline? I said, she's Madeline. She goes, oh, she's Madeline also. She goes, she sells ads for Adam Carolla, which is a podcast. Have you ever thought of having a podcast? Because you're so inspirational. And I'm like, no, I've never thought of having a podcast. I leave. I think about that conversation right? That conversation only happened because I told her my daughter's name, right? And then she's like, oh, I know a Maddie. Oh, Madeline. Oh, she works in. So then she introduced us on email, me and this woman, Maddie. And I go, oh, it's so funny. I just had a daughter. How do you spell it? We spelled it the same way. She's like, let's have coffee. That's so cute. So we have coffee and we're talking about podcasting. And she's like, yeah, you should try it. I'm like, well, how many downloads do you need to have a successful podcast? And she's like, you need like approximately 10,000 an episode. I'm like, yeah, right. Like, I'm not on social media. Like, so I decide, what the heck? For some reason, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to record in my closet. I'm going to put it out in the world. And now it's 50 million downloads later, right? That chose me. Why? Because what did I know? I was like, I want to use my voice. But you know what? It didn't work out using my voice to be a songwriter. But as soon as I stepped into the podcast booth, which was in my linen closet, it worked like the easiest thing I've ever seen in my life. It chose me. So the problem is we're so busy existentially worrying about what the hell is it? No. The alignment was, I went to the bagel shop. I saw Amy. She asked me my daughter's name. Then she told me to talk to this woman. I talked to this woman and I tried it. If it wasn't that, it would have been something else. But the something was always, am I having a good time at the bagel shop? Because that was the opening to see this girl, right? And actually, it's so interesting how I met Amy, the girl who was at the bagel shop. Amy is a songwriter. When I stopped writing music, when I stopped having my record deal, I started writing music because I started licensing my music to TV and film. I was like, wait a minute, why do I need a record deal to be successful? Why don't I just call the networks myself and try to license music to shows like Grey's Anatomy or to McDonald's commercials? And guess what? I was really successful at that. And then because I was successful at that, I was featured in a few Billboard articles. And then some songwriters asked me if I could teach them. And I was like, sure. So I started teaching songwriters in my living room the business of songwriting and how to license music. Then I started an online course. It was called 6-Figure Songwriting. And one of the people in that 6-Figure Songwriting class was this girl, Amy. And by the way, that songwriting class made $2 million in its first year. And the only reason I did that class is because I was writing music for film and TV for 10 years while I was having my first 2 kids. And somebody said to me, for every song you sell, there's a line of people around the block who want to know how you did that. And you live in LA and there's so many songwriters who are just waiting for their big break and they don't realize that they can make $5,000 writing a song for One Tree Hill, or they can make $80,000 writing a song for Payless Shoes, which is true. And I was like, nah. And I kept pushing it off until finally I was like, why don't I just say yes to that? So many songwriters keep asking me. So I started with a workshop in my living room, 10 people. Then I rented a theater. I did that for a year. It was always filled up. Then next thing I know, I started an online class and Amy was in that online class. And meanwhile, it led me to starting a podcast. I never would have started the podcast. Before I talked to Amy that day about Maddie, I had never heard a podcast. I never thought about it. But the point is that when you stop worrying about what it is, and in every moment you just say yes to what is needed from you, would I have thought that my existential dream was going to come from teaching a class to songwriters? No, actually, I thought quite the contrary. When my friend told me to start a class teaching the business of songwriting, I actually felt insulted. I told him, I was like, I feel like you're telling me I'm not really an artist, so I should teach people the business of making music for a living. He's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, I know people will read this Billboard article and they'll be thinking, how do I do what she's doing? And that's a cash opportunity, but it's not just cash in the bank. You could really help people. You could really help songwriters. And I was like, wait, I like the idea of helping songwriters. That's kind of fun because I know their pain and very few people get record deals. And by saying yes to that and not overthinking it, I started having fun being of service. I started making a ton of money. And then I started a podcast.
I love the story. Thank you. I'm going to take that to veer into a question that I had really from the beginning of your book, where you talk about, we're in this, not this age of, but I've never experienced it as being so popular of manifesting. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's fair to say take it to task, but you question the concept of attracting. And you say, instead of attracting, just receive. So that's kind of the story you talked about. Now, these things happen. I think I mentioned, it might've been before we started the show, that I have recently been reading Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experience.
Gorgeous.
Tremendous book. However, and I don't want to pose it against us. I'm going to ask you to grapple with reconciling it somewhat, or throwing stones at it. Either way, whatever you want to do. Over here, I'm going to put Napoleon Hill, right? One of his core tenets is definiteness of purpose. He would have had you in his story. This is my own interpretation, saying, it's Cathy, it's you deciding, I want to be a podcaster. I want to talk about this. Nothing's going to stand in my way. This is it. And so I'm going to put over here Michael Singer, and really where I hear you coming from of, just let it happen to you. And this is one of those areas where in our realm of growth, I like human potential as my overall banner with that, but of us striving that. Those are things that I see people looking at going, those seem very different. What do I do? Do I let it go? Or do I make it happen? Let's stop there.
So it's both. And here's why it's both. Because it is so fun to make it happen. And here's what making it happen looks like. When you are a kid or you are an adult, you're 15, you're 3, or you're 45, or you're 69, and you think the thought of what you want to make happen, it feels like electricity in that moment. And guess what? You just made it happen. Because what did you do? You felt the feeling of having it. The only thing you're seeking is the feeling. We're all chasing a feeling. The only reason you want to be at the beach at the Ritz-Carlton in Hawaii is because how you perceive it's going to make you feel. So why wouldn't you feel that way right now? Yeah. Why would you wait till you get there to feel that much joy and abundance? You could feel it right now. That's the making it happen. And what I mean is, things are created in consciousness. Consciousness creates matter, right? DNA is an energetic software code. It's energy, and it's a code, and each one of us is the 3D printing of our code of energy, which is our DNA. We do it the same way. Everything in our life, our health, our wealth, our relationships, our bank account, all of it in the 3D is the 3-dimensional printout of our energetic code, okay? So when you go into a guitar shop and you pull a guitar off the wall and you pluck the G string, every guitar in the shop vibrates, but just the G string vibrates back because the signal is the same signal. It's the same tuning fork. That's the law of resonance. So when you think of something you want to make happen and you make it happen in your body, you experience it right now, you just drew that experience right to you. Now, why is that all there is? Then you let it go? Because that's how you create it. The outcome is God's business. The soul doesn't get to heaven and stack up all of its achievements and say, look how many trophies I won. Look how many followers I had. No. The thing that makes the soul excited is being in it moment by moment. So when I started the podcast, I did feel like, let's do this, but not let's do this so I can hit the chart. It was, let's do this in this moment. How fun does it feel? Because I feel like the biggest podcaster of all time doing it right now. I had the outcome in the doing of it. So I let go of the outcome. I didn't need it. Our book just hit this bestseller list. I swear to you, these are my exact words. In July, when we met as a team with Simon & Schuster and my publicist and my people, I said, I am allergic to the idea of striving to hit some list. We hit the list in terms of how good it feels right now. I just narrated this book in the studio alone, me and the director and the engineer, and cried my face off as I read it because I was so deeply satisfied with the creation of it. That was the list. And that's how we manifested being on the list, because it didn't matter. If you want to be in love and you want to meet the love of your life and you go on a date and you're like, I'm going to make it happen. They're going to like me. I know they're going to like me. I want them to like me because they're going to like me. They will like you less. But if you go on the date and you're like, I'm so in love with life. I love it so much. It's so fun to meet new people, and it's so fun to just walk down the street, whether I'm in a bookshop by myself or with you. It's all great. Guess what? They're going to be into you because you don't need it. Because we don't manifest from lack. We manifest from wholeness. So the problem most people have is they either stop thinking about things they want to create, which is not the job. We're here to create like Harold and the Purple Crayon. You're here to turn thoughts into things. But the idea is enjoy them as you're thinking about them. Find the joy in just the creation itself and let go of the outcome, because there is no reason that you would prolong how good you feel until it comes. So the surrender is you don't need the outcome. You just like think. I mean, I am such a manifester. I just like thinking of new ideas. I would like to sit and think of ideas for you. I'd like to think of ideas for myself. That alone, it makes me feel like I can do, because I'm creating it from consciousness alone. Just the thought of creating and doing something, I can feel how good it will feel. And then I already got the benefit of the outcome, so I don't need the outcome. And then what happens is as you move in the world that way, whatever is the highest and best, most aligned outcome is what's going to come into your life. And it doesn't matter because you didn't need it anyway, because you were already feeling so damn good every day. Like, to me, if you're not going to love writing the book and you're only going to like it because you're white knuckling it to the outcome, what a punishment. That sucks. I'm so impatient. I could never live my life only being happy once the outcome happened. But I'm so impatient that I want to create things every second and say, I'm going to make this happen 100%. I can feel it right now. Like I'm doing it right now.
I feel it. I feel it too. Thank you. You just said emphatically, find the joy in the creation itself. And my thoughts went to self. Can we find the joy in the creation of ourselves? I'm going to take that and back into consciousness, which is a word that obviously you're familiar with. And if we're reading, Singer and Tolle and those folks, we're familiar with it. But the culture, I feel like we've lost it, kind of the lost art of consciousness and even what that means. And so I've been playing with that a lot, and it feels like it gets paired with awareness.
It does.
And I'm a little dissatisfied with that, even with myself, because I can be aware. I'm usually aware. I'm the guy, I like to think of Jason Bourne, man. He's aware of everything, of how people are feeling. You're kind of empathetic to what's going on here, what's going on there. I'm aware. It doesn't mean I'm conscious, though, of me, of what I am feeling. And okay, stay with me here. You said we don't manifest from lack, but fullness. The lack is where I'm coming to in this conceptualization of consciousness, that I am not conscious if I feel lack. Back to the finding the joy in the creation itself. If I feel lack in me, which has then pulled me to, and you speak to that or write to this in the book, to my identity. My identity. We are so threatened today that that we've got so many books on anxiety and how we react to everything like a bear's chasing us, and it's not. We're so seldom in physical danger. We're pretty seldom in psychological. Now I say this compassionately because some people are, but in psychological danger, most of it is just a danger, a perceived danger to my identity. So that's my circle coming back to consciousness, because you use that word, and talk about that somewhat.
Yeah, it's really, really a beautiful conversation. It's really the only conversation. I think people throw words around, and we have to really define them. Like if you go to Alaska, they don't say it's snowing. They have like 70 words for snow, because snow means a lot of things. It's always snowing. What kind of snow? So when you say awareness, I was like, yeah, awareness, consciousness. You're like, yeah, that doesn't land for me because I'm aware, like Jason Bourne. It's like, well, what does awareness really mean? What does that really mean to me? What do I understand and perceive that consciousness and awareness can really feel fulfilling? And what does it mean that they live and breathe the same way? When I started studying meditation, what I realized was, just like the heart is always beating, the mind is always racing. There's nothing wrong with that. That's neutral. That's what the mind does. When you meditate, the goal is not thinking. The goal is to be a witness to your thinking. Now, when you're a witness to your thoughts, you're not your thoughts then. It's the difference between being pulled over on the side of the road, walking through a snowstorm, which feels pretty miserable because you're caught in a blizzard, or being in your living room with a cup of cocoa on a winter's day looking at a snowstorm. It's actually gorgeous. When we are a witness to the mind, rather than being caught and literally every thought hits you like a hammer and you just believe everything you think, because thoughts are not facts, right? When you're in awareness, you are connected to who you really are, which is this consciousness that's bigger than your body, bigger than time, timeless, no body, no where, and no time, witnessing the mind and no longer choosing it. In fact, you start to perceive that you are bigger than your body, which you are, and you are bigger than time. That's consciousness. And when we are dropped into that place, we feel so amazing. We feel so connected to all that is, and we feel so alive. And that's where we create from. Because think about it. Energy creates matter, right? Photosynthesis is energy creating physical things like the garden, right? Energy creates matter. Matter doesn't create matter, right? When a person is having an orgasm, their mind goes into gamma. It moves faster than the speed of light. That's what creates life. So light speed is actually slower than gamma speed, which is consciousness, which is where things are created. So if you see something with the naked eye, you're seeing it, it's slower than the speed of light. It was created before it actually hit the speed of light. So when you have thunder and lightning, you hear one after you, which is the one that goes first, lightning or thunder? Forgot what it is, but it's like the lightning happens and then you hear the thunder, but you hear it delayed is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It already happened, but by the time the sound waves get to you, it sounds like it happened later, but it really didn't. What we are perceiving in the 3D, we created from whatever consciousness we already had. So all day long, if you're caught up in your unconscious, in your mind, you think what you thought yesterday pretty much, which makes you feel what you felt yesterday, which makes you do what you did yesterday, which makes you create what you created yesterday. But if you become conscious and you start to plug into these more expansive feelings within you, you start creating something different on a 3D level, because consciousness is what creates matter. So we need to move out of the physical, out of the slow down vibration of the mind when it's caught in cortisol, and move into flow state, which is where things move really, really fast. And that's where we start creating from consciousness. And that's what starts to get super interesting.
You've mentioned, so some of this, I come from a Christian background, very staunch Bible Belt. I mean, that was and I was in it hook, line, and sinker. I'm going to say the religious aspect of it. And a lot of my audience comes from that as well. So I'm sensitive to that. A lot of what we're talking here in my past would be in the woo-woo category, right? And yet you've also mentioned Jesus so often. And the more that I have dove into the woo-woo, the more I look and go, gosh, that's Jesus, isn't it? That's who we're being called to emulate. Just what you talked about there, that you just define so many things that come under the description of Jesus, and he calls us to follow him, be like him. And yet, man, that was just, again, it was a disconnect in the church. I'm not trying to pick on them, but such a disconnect and so limiting.
Yeah, I mean, we all are created in the likeness and the image of God, which means we all have the power of this mystical inside of us, which can turn things into other things. We have that power. And the way that we can understand it so it doesn't feel woo is to understand the science of it, right? And so every thought we think creates a chemical drip in the brain. So if you think a thought like love, you create serotonin on your biological level. In fact, the people that live in the blue zones tend to be rather religious, like the Seventh-day Adventists who live in Loma Linda. What they find across all these blue zones and these people that live into their hundreds is they have less cortisol in their body because of their prayer practice. So it's not woo. We're just putting the science behind it. The more you move out of the limitation of the ego in the mind The mind is going to drip you cortisol. It's going to say, God is far away. Everything's far away. I need to achieve more in order to be more. I'm afraid. There's a tiger coming around the corner. There's a threat coming around the corner, which is going to literally create inflammation in your body caused by cortisol. The more you think thoughts like, I'm connected in my heart, I don't need to achieve anything. I'm already safe. The universe protects me. God protects me. I'm connected to God. I'm being in flow. I'm being assigned. I have what to offer at any moment. I can love another person into life. I'm exactly who I need to be. God's not asking me to change the world. God's asking me to change the world for one person every day. And I can do that, right? You start to drip serotonin into your mind, which literally makes your biology repair itself and you live longer. So is that woo, or is that just a really beautiful scientific way of showing that everything that Jesus was talking about will actually make you healthier? Now, isn't that amazing that actually now we can prove that on a scientific level, you get a biological upgrade when you believe in God and you connect? In fact, Dr. Lisa Miller has been studying the spiritual brain, the awakened brain at Columbia. And she said that when a person has a connection to the divine, they actually have more cognitive capacity that opens up in their brain. They actually can perceive greater possibilities and they actually become more creative because they become a vehicle for like the wisdom of God that's greater than their mind can hold. It's something outside of the mind, right? Real intelligence is heart intelligence. And so what I was saying was when a person is in flow state like Michelangelo or Elton John or Tom Petty or Michael Jordan, they're moving, their brain waves are moving so quickly, it's faster than the ego can perceive. It's on a higher dimension. When God created the world and God said, let there be light, let there be this, let there be, it was faster than the speed of light. That's what I'm saying. We can emulate God. The mind usually does its worst when it overthinks and it gets really slow and it gets into perfectionism. It's trying to control and predict the outcome so it doesn't move quickly. When someone's in flow state, they're moving so quickly, fast. The brain is moving so quickly. The reason why Will Ferrell is so funny is he has no idea he was about to say what he just said because he's in flow. Okay. So we now know enough about flow consciousness that it's not woo. It's like, that's where our genius is. Our genius is getting out of the way of the mind and letting God move through us. And when we move really quickly, we find spontaneity. Joy is associated with spontaneity. We're playing, we're being messy, we're enjoying it. And then the most brilliant, beautiful things get born. And that's what that means.
I like your line, real intelligence is heart intelligence, and reminds me of, Eckhart Tolle, A Whole New Earth, and him talking towards religion with it. It was such it has been in the Western culture, and that's where I grew up in, such an intellectual pursuit and not a pursuit of your level of consciousness. I'm going, I had no, again, it was so far removed, and I don't need to diss the religion, but it missed that part. Maybe it got some other things okay, but it missed that part. And to me today, that's why we're here talking about it. It's all of it. You say in the book, you said, instead of asking yourself, what am I supposed to do? Ask yourself, who am I supposed to be?
Yeah.
Who am I supposed to be? It's not a question that we don't learn this in school. Most of us don't have parents that taught us that. Mine necessarily didn't. It was still a performance. It was the best they knew. It was an external focus. It was a performance, what we do out here. And even that, if you ask me, who am I supposed to be? I would right away think I'm supposed to be the kind of person that does these things. I'm still going to go back to it.
I write about this in the book in so many different ways. I try to tell these stories. And one of the most amazing ones is that it's a good example of it. When I met, I had Mitch Albom on the podcast a few times. He wrote all these great books, Tuesdays with Morrie and a lot of 5 People You Meet in Heaven, amazing books. And what I didn't know is that the story behind Tuesdays with Morrie is like even a better story than the book itself. And if anybody knows that book, because it was on the New York Times bestseller list for like a million years, but basically that book, Mitch Albom, long story, Mitch Albom went to Brandeis. He wanted to go into sportscasting. His professor used to call him coach. And he said he would keep in touch. He never did. 13 years later, he saw his professor on TV. And he was like, oh my God, he's dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. I said I would keep in touch. I never did. That's terrible. I'm going to call him. So he calls his professor, Morrie. He gets on the phone and he says, "Hey, coach." And he called him coach. And Mitch said, "You remember you used to call me that?" He said, "Of course." He said, "How you been?" He goes, "Well, I feel really terrible. I didn't see you. I said I was going to keep in touch." He said, "I'm going to drive up and see you on Tuesday, my day off." He wound up going every Tuesday until Maury died. And he wrote this book, Tuesdays with Maury. Except here's the most amazing story. And this is about who are you supposed to be, not what are you supposed to do. 2 weeks before Maury died, he said to Mitch, "I feel terrible because I'm going to die, but I feel worse that my family is going to die figuratively after I die because they're going to have all these bills to pay because it's been so expensive to keep me alive. And what am I going to do?" And Mitch said, "I have an idea. I'm going to take all the notes from being with you and I'm going to try to put them into a book so that if there's any money that can get made from the book, it can pay off your medical bills." So he went to all these publishers. They all said no. Finally, he went to a publisher who took a chance on him, and he put all the money in Maury's name. And the book was a huge success. And all the money went to Maury's family. And what happened was, he was a sportscaster, Mitch Albom, at the time. He was on TV. He talked about sports. People were coming over to him everywhere he went, in the airport, at restaurants, saying, "I can't believe that book you wrote. You know, I lost my mom. I lost my dad. That book was..." And he was called to a different purpose. He started writing spiritual books. Then he opened an orphanage in Haiti. Then he adopted a little girl who had a terminal illness, knowing she would die, and she did. Then he went to his city in Detroit and single-handedly made a huge difference in the homeless issue. All because of this conversation with this professor. And that is the answer to who are you supposed to be, not what are you supposed to do. Because if he zooms out and looks at it, it's so obvious. He didn't know that book would change his life and be a New York Times bestseller. He just wanted to do the right thing and try to help his professor. And by doing something so beautiful, it gave him back his entire life. So much purpose, right? Yeah. So much purpose. I heard it said that the opposite of depression is not happiness, it's purpose. And so it's not what do I need to do in order to achieve more. It's who do I need to be in every moment? What purpose is God asking me to find in every moment? That's how we create the most magnificent lives. And I've interviewed about 1,000 people on my show, and I'm sure it will be no different when I interview you. But their lives are a symphony because of who they are, who they become, not what they do, but who they are. And so the real gift to ourselves is who we can be every day. And we're so busy worrying about what do we need to do, what strategy, and who do we need to impress, that we forget that it's in the being. Because little do you know, sitting right next to you on that bus stop is the person who needed you most today. And you missed that because you were so worried about what you needed to do next rather than who you need to be.
I really don't want to disturb that right there. There's the mic drop. I'd say we covered maybe 1/10 of your book at most. So there's the shameless pitch, folks, to get the book. The first chapter alone to me was worth the price of admission and beyond. And it's so interesting as you talked about, as you mentioned, having, that I'll be on your show soon too, that, yeah. So, I mean, I give credit to what I have been, what I have done, so much more interested in what I'm becoming now. And thank you for being a part of that. I don't know why. I just did not expect it from the book when I got it. And that may be even me of being influenced somewhat by some of what I've seen of you out there. And then I got the book. I just give it up to divine purpose.
I mean, first of all, that makes a lot of sense. And second of all, yeah, I'm so grateful. It's such an answered prayer. I said to my team, I was like, I really want to connect with more amazing men because I've been doing this show for 8 years. And for whatever the reason, women, even the book, it's like pink and yellow and like women tend to listen to women. And, we have most of our audience is women. And I'm like, we're like this secret. And yet at the same time, these messages are so universal. And so it's such an answered prayer because women really need to be connected to men like you. And I love that we can have these very like deep universal conversations. And it's such a compliment, such a lovely, beautiful, generous thing, what you said, all the things that you said. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got some other hold on. I got some other guys I want you to talk with, but thank you for this. And the book is tremendous. For those watching the video, it's sitting behind me, and we will be promoting that as much as we can. But I'll just be studying it for myself. This will go into my own cache of books that I am using as I am becoming. So thank you, Cathy.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in this conversation. That again is Cathy with a C, Cathy Heller. Her podcast, you can check that out wherever you're listening to this right now, and it's Abundant Ever After. That is also the title of her new book, Abundant Ever After, Tools for Creating a Life of Prosperity and Ease. And again, if you get the book, if you'll take your receipt, I believe, and go to cathyheller.com/book, she has some of her top courses that you can get for free. Got a question or a comment for myself or for Cathy, you can connect with me always at kevinmiller.co or email me, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you just drive further and most of all, enjoy the ride.
Yeah.